Good day, everyone. We are Group Kafiss, and today we will be presenting Module 6 Transportation Safety and Economics. Our discussion focuses on two critical dimensions of transportation engineering safety and economics. These are not separate topics. In reality, they are deeply interconnected. A safe transportation system reduces human loss and at the same time minimizes economic cost, while an unsafe system creates not only social harm but also significant financial burdens on society. So, as future civil engineers, our role is not just to design roads, but to design systems that are safe, efficient, and economically sustainable. This slide outlines the structure of our report. We begin with the foundation of transportation safety, including planning, stakeholders, and strategies. Then we move to the economic aspects, such as cost impacts, investment returns, and the role of transportation in economic development. What's important to understand here is that safety decisions affect economic outcomes, and economic constraints influence safety investments. So, throughout this presentation, as you can see, there are topics that we will be going to discuss from transportation safety overview, safety stakeholders, and the four E's, crash prevention and mitigation strategies, fundamentals economics of safety, economic importance of transportation, types of transportation impacts, economic returns of transport investments, transportation as an economic factor, and lastly, the transportation impacts and synthesis. So, throughout this presentation, we are not just studying concepts, we are analyzing how engineering decisions translate into real world societal impacts. First is the transportation safety overview. This section is guided with five key questions that frame transportation safety as a discipline. First, what is transportation safety planning? Second, who are responsible for implementing it? Third, what factors influence safety performance? Fourth, why is collaboration necessary? And finally, what outcomes do we expect? These questions are important because they shift our perspective from simply reacting to accidents to systematically preventing them. Instead of asking, why did a crash happen? Modern safety say engineering asks, how can we design a system where crashes are less likely to occur and less severe if they do? This reflects a proactive and system-based approach, which is the foundation of modern transportation safety. So, what is transportation safety planning? Transportation safety planning is defined as a goal-driven, data-informed, and collaborative process aimed at reducing fatalities and serious injuries. Okay, so let's break down. First, transportation safety planning is goal-driven. The primary objective or primary goal is clear: reduce deaths and serious injuries, often aligned with global initiatives like Vision Zero. This means safety is not, but it is measurable and target oriented. Next, it is collaborative. Safety is not handled by engineers alone. It involves law enforcement for behavior control, health sectors or health departments for injury data, policymakers for regulations, and emergency responders for post-crash care. This shows that safety is a multi-sector responsibility. Transportation safety planning is data-driven. Decisions are based on crash statistics, GIS mapping, traffic patterns, and this ensures that interventions are objective and evidence-based, not based on assumptions. Next, it is integrated. Safety is embedded into all transportation planning processes. It is not something added later. It is considered from planning to design to operation. So overall, transportation safety planning represents a shift towards scientific, coordinated, and continuous improvement in road systems. So, why safety planning matters? What is its significance? What is its importance? As you can see, this slide emphasizes the magnitude and impact of transportation safety issues. 38,000 plus Philippines road deaths per year. Imagine that. 4.4 million serious injuries per year. 340 billion pesos an annual economic cost in the Philippines. And 94% crashes involve human error. So we are dealing with thousands of fatalities annually, as I said earlier, millions of injuries, and massive economic losses reaching hundreds of billions of pesos. Now, one key insight here is that 94% of crashes involve human error. But instead of blaming drivers, modern safety thinking recognizes that humans will always make mistakes, so the system must be designed to be forgiving. This leads us to the core principles of effective safety planning. Performance based. We set measurable targets and continuously evaluate progress. Safety plans must set measurable targets and monitor progress against them continuously. Next, proactive, not reactive. Identifying high risk corridors before crashes occur, rather than waiting for tragedy. We identify high risk areas before accidents happen, not after. Next, it is equity focused. We recognize that some groups of areas are vulnerable and require targeted interventions. Certain communities, especially tribal areas, face disproportionately high crisis rates and require targeted attention. Next is iterative processes. Safety planning is not one time. It involves with new data, behavior changes, and technology. So overall, safety planning is important because it transforms transportation systems into adaptive, inclusive, and resilient systems. Let's proceed with the safety planning process. First step is to identify partners. We bring together all stakeholders, DOT, law enforcement, EMs, engineers, health, health agencies, advocates, and planners. This ensures shared responsibility and coordinations. After identifying partners, now is the time to collect data. We gather crash records or crash data, injury records, road conditions, GIS mapping, road audits, and traffic volumes. These forms the foundation of analysis. And after collecting data, the next step is to analyze the data collected. We identify high-risk location or the hotspots, the crash patterns, the trend identification, network screening, and the most important is the contributing factors. This step transforms raw data into, let's say, actionable insights. Next step is to develop strategies. So after identifying partners, collecting data, and analyzing it, let's now proceed with the development of strategies. We select appropriate solutions such as engineering improvements, enforcement policies, educational campaigns. After the development of strategies, let's proceed with the implementations of projects, or let's implement the projects. Actual deployment of safety measures in the field. Deploying engineering, enforcement, education, and EMS measures. After that is to evaluate outcomes, of course. We need to measure effectiveness and refine strategies. What's important here is that this is not linear. It is a feedback loop. So overall, this process reflects engineering practice where design to implement, to evaluate, to improve. This systematic approach ensures that safety solutions are efficient, measurable, and continuously optimized. Next slide is the transportation planners as safety partners. This slide highlights the role of transportation planners as key integrators in the safety system. Planners do not just design, They connect technical analysis with policy and implementation. Transportation planners are essential facilitators in the safety ecosystem, bridging technical analysis with policy implementation across all modes of travel. Their responsibilities includes managing and analyzing crash data using GIS, identifying both current and future transportation needs, coordinating across different modes, road transit, pedestrian, and freight, and also evaluating safety performance of projects. So as you can see, it is listed the responsibilities of planner in the safety in terms of transportation system. Participating in safety plan development and implementation, of course, cooperating on statewide or regional safety committees and emphasis area teams. Specializing in transit, bicycle, and pedestrian modes. Also evaluating project outcomes and safety performance measures. They also play a major role in initiatives like Vision Zero. So, what is Vision Zero? It aims to eliminate all traffic fatalities. To support this vision, planners set performance targets, align funding with safety priorities, engage stakeholders and the public, ensure safety is included in all planning decisions. So, to conclude or to summarize everything in this slide, planners ensure that safety is not isolated. It is integrated across the entire transportation system. This highlights an important takeaway. Transportation safety is not just about engineering design. It is about coordination, policy, and long-term system planning. So to conclude about the transportation safety planning is a data-driven, collaborative, and continuous process that integrates engineering, human behavior, and policy. As future civil engineers, our responsibility is not only to design infrastructure, but to design systems that protect lives while supporting economic and societal development.
Everyone. I'm Jenna Rose Siderano, and I'll continue the report about transportation safety and economics. So I'm going to discuss about the safety stakeholders and the 4 E's. So the 4 E's of transportation safety is composed of engineering, enforcement, emergency medical services, and education. So, for engineering, it identifies and designs solutions for infrastructure safety. Engineers analyze crash data, conduct network screening, implement roadway improvements, and evaluate before and after outcomes. So, here sa engineering, sila ang magplano, mag-design o mag-improve sa mga road infrastructure para ma-reduce ang crashes o ang pag-travel is more safety. So next is we have the enforcement. So law enforcement collect crash reports, perform traffic law enforcement, lead behavioral safety campaigns, and share data with transportation professionals to prevent future crashes. So here in enforcement, they apply traffic laws, monitor behavior, and promote compliance to prevent violations and accidents. So I think everyone is familiar with the enforcement since this is can be seen mostly when handling with transportation. So next is we have the emergency medical services. So the first responders, paramedics, and EMS teams reduce crash fatality severity through rapid skilled response. So they also provide critical data on injuries and contribute to crash scene safety. So ang kanang mga emergency medical services, sila ang mag-provide of fast and skilled response to accidents like crashes. So sila ang mag-reduce sa injuries o mostly mag-save sa lives. And the last is education. So, educators, including school teachers, DOTS, MPOS, and health educators, administer programs that raise road user awareness of risk and promote safe behaviors. So, here's education. They informs and trains road users to understand risk and practice safe behaviors. So in other words, kaning mga education sila ang maghatag og knowledge sa mga road users like drivers and etc. kung unsa ang mga sakto nga practices para malayo sa accidents o mag-practice og safe behaviors. So, next is the engineering designing safer roads. So, engineers are the technical backbone of transportation safety. They translate crash data into actionable roadway improvements. So we have network screening, safety project design, before after studies, crash data analysis, statewide safety plans, and coordination. So here in network screening, it is a systematically identifies hazardous road segments using crash frequency rate and severity indices. So here in safety project design, it develops countermeasures such as improved signage, lighting, intersection geometry, and pedestrian facilities. And before after study, so it evaluates the effectiveness of implemented safety projects to inform future investment decisions. So this is very understandable naman, no? So they evaluate the effectiveness and then afterwards, ilahan ng review and then para ma-inform for future investment decisions. So next is we have the crash data analysis, which analyzes crash patterns by type, location, time, and contributing factors to pinpoint root causes. Next is we have the statewide safety plans, which participates in developing and improving regional road safety plans aligned with national goals. And then lastly is we have the coordination, works with state, regional, and local engineers to ensure a unified approach to infrastructure safety. Then we have the E2 and E3 or the enforcement and emergency medical services. So here in enforcement, we collect and manage crash reports at the scene, conduct traffic law enforcement on roads and highways, lead behavioral safety campaigns like seatbelts, DUI, and speeding, share crash data with transportation and planning professionals, and advocate stricter penalties for dangerous driving behaviors. So here in emergency medical services, we have the first responders, which are the ones who fire and rescue, paramedics, and DOT personnel who arrive at crash scenes and initiate emergency care. So kung naay mga accidents or mga crash, so ang ato first responders ay mao ang mga fire and rescue ug mga paramedics. So response time, so crash survival is directly linked to how quickly EMS can reach and treat injured persons. So health data, EMS personnel record trauma data at the scene and update fatality or injury records at hospitals. And lastly, we have the scene safety, which advise on emergency responder safety protocols while working on active crash sites. So, ang ato other key safety stakeholders, we have the health departments, which state and local health agency provide injury prevention programs, safety data, public health approaches, and insights on active transportation or biking. So here they support the injury prevention, promote safe travel habits, and they provide data for safety programs. So next is we have the safety advocates. So locally based citizen groups, law enforcement, public health, and civic organizations drive community awareness and advocacy for safer transportation. So kaning mga safety advocates sila ang mag-encourage sa community na maging aware, mag-push for safer transportation policies og practices. So next is we have the tribal governments. So they are responsible for tribal transportation safety needs. Tribal areas face disproportionality, high fatality rates, and require targeted engagement in safety planning. So here sa tribal government, sila ang mag-manage o improve sa transportation safety sa tribal areas with targeted solutions. And next is we have the elected officials. So they are champions for safety, funding, and legislation. So elected officials vocalize support, attend project ceremonies, and may serve on safety plan executive committees. So sila ang there is elected officials, so this is very common like sa government. So sila ang mag-create sa policies, sila mag-budgeting, like allocate funding or support safety initiatives. So here in planners, we have the DOT, MPO, and local planners integrate safety into all transportation planning processes. So they manage data tools like GIS and coordinate across multiple modes. So there is a planner sila ang mag-incorporate sa safety into transportation systems. So land use and project development. And lastly, we have the universities and research. So, academic institutions contribute research evaluation studies and innovative approaches to safety data collection and analysis and countermeasure effectiveness. So, there is the universities and research. So, sila mag-conduct sa studies, mag-develop og innovative strategies para ma-improve ang ato road and safety. Okay, so that's it for my report.
Hey everyone, I'm Mary Rose Alberida, and today I'll be discussing one of the most important topics in transportation engineering. How can we prevent road crashes, reduce their severity, and respond effectively when they happen? My report is organized around three key time frames: before the crash, during the crash, and after the crash. As shown on this slide, these correspond to three strategic pillars: prevention, mitigation, and emergency response. Prevention focuses on eliminating crashes causes before they happened through licensing, enforcement, speed regulation, and road design. Mitigation is about reducing severity of injuries when a crash does occur through vehicle safety standards and roadway design. And emergency response is about what happens after a crash, ensuring victims receive fast, effective medical care. Prevention focuses on addressing the causes of accidents: human behavior, road conditions, vehicle standards, and overall regulatory environment. We can group prevention strategies into three main areas. First is driver behavior. This involves commercial driver testing and licensing to ensure that only qualified individuals operate large vehicles. It also includes enforcing law against drunk or impaired driving, implementing speed limits, and using traffic cameras to detect red light violations. These measures direct address human error, which remains the leading cause of most crashes. Second is road infrastructure. Even skilled drivers can be put at risk by unsafe road conditions. That's why it's important to standardize traffic signs, improve intersection layouts, manage access points along arterial roads, and monitor roads for weather-related hazards. These are infrastructure-based measures designed to make roads safer for everyone. Third is regulatory oversight. This includes conducting aviation safety inspections, carrying out post-crash investigation to identify systematic issues, setting vehicle safety standards, and regular reviewing traffic laws to ensure that they remain effective and relevant. Prevention is our first line of defense. However, because not only crashes can be avoided, because not all crashes can be avoided, the second line of defense is mitigation, reducing the severity of injury and damage when crashes do occur. Unlike prevention strategies, mitigation measures do not necessarily stop crashes from happening, but they greatly reduce the severity of injuries and fatalities when the accident occur. There are four major areas of crash mitigation. First, roadway design measures. Wider, clear zones give drivers more space to recover if they lost control of their vehicles before hitting obstacles. Improved medians help reduce the risk of head-on collisions, while properly graded ditches can lessen rollover severity. These are passive safety features built directly into the road to minimize harm during crashes. Second is vehicle safety standards. Mandatory crashes testing, seat belts, airboard, airbags, tire grading systems, and electronic stability control are essentially safety requirements. These technologies have saved millions of lives worldwide by reducing the impact of collisions and helping drivers maintain control of their vehicles. Third is fire and material standards. Flammability standards for aircraft cabin materials and vehicle interiors help reduce fire-related injuries and death after a crash. This is especially important in commercial aviation and public transport, where large numbers of passengers may be involved. Fourth is roadside hardware. Improved guardrails and breakaway posts, which are designed to collapse upon impact, help absorb crash energies and prevent vehicles from crossing into opposing lanes or colliding with rigid structures. With prevention and mitigation measures in place, the final layer of protection is emergency response, the action taken during the critical minute immediately after a crash. Response times, time, and quality of care after a crash are critical factors in determining survival. In many cases, even a few minutes can mean the difference between life and death. There are six key components of an effective emergency response system. First is airport capabilities. Airports require specialized crash bars and rescue systems, including fume suppression equipment, rapid response vehicles, and highly trained rescue teams. Aviation incidents often involve unique risks such as fuel fires and passenger entrapment, making specialized response essential. Second is EMT certification. Standardized training and certification for emergency medical technicians ensure that crash victims receive consistent and high quality pre-hospital care, regardless of where the incident occurs. Third is video surveillance. Camera installed in high risk or high crash areas help detect incident more quickly and allow emergency services to be dispatched faster. Every second saved is that in detection can significantly improve survival outcomes. Fourth is pre-positioned vehicles. Strategically locating ambulance and emergency response units along high-risk corridors instead of keeping them only at center station can greatly reduce response times. First is MADI system. Modern vehicles equipped with automatic crash notification technology can immediately alert emergency responders when a collision occurs, even if the occupants are unable to call for help themselves. And lastly, road connectivity. Emergency medical service personnel often provide valuable feedback about road where poor connectivity or access delays emergency response. They, this information helps planner identify areas that need infrastructure improvements. Together, these six components work to minimize loss of life and reduce the severity of injuries or after a crash occurs. With prevention, mitigation, and emergency response combined, we can now see how all three strategies from one integrated approach to transportation safely. An effective road safety program cannot rely on just one layer of protection. It must address all three stages of the crash life cycle simultaneously. As shown in this table, the framework is divided into three phases. Before the crash, the focus is on preventing accident by eliminating three root causes. The lead agencies at this stage include the Department of Transportation, Law Enforcement, and the State Highway Safety Office, using tools such as driver licensing, traffic enforcement, and safe road design. During the crash, the focus shifts to reducing the severity of injuries and fatalities. In this phase, vehicle manufacturers and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administrations, or NHTSA, play a major role by implementing vehicle safety standards, protective barriers, and road clear zones. After the crash, the priority becomes improving survival rates. Emergency medical services, hospitals, and the Department of Transportation work together to improve response times, strengthen EMT training, and implement Mayday systems that help emergency responder reach victims faster. The key insight from this framework is that no single agency or strategy is enough. Road safety is a shared responsibility. It required engineers, legislators, manufacturers, medical professionals, enforcement agencies, and the public all working together throughout the entire crash life cycle.
So, good day everyone. I'm Gunat Jane Espina, and my topic covers the fundamental economics of transportation safety, specifically how economic principles explain why transportation safety matters, not just morally but financially. So, we often think about road safety in terms of human lives saved, but there's an equally compelling economic story. Unsafe transportation systems drain billions from economies through medical bills, lost productivity, and infrastructure damage. So, safety, when viewed through an economic lens, is not a luxury, it is a strategic investment. So, safety is not just a moral imperative, it is an economic one. The costs of unsafe transportation systems are staggering and affect demand, supply, quality of services, and overall productivity. So, next. So, safety in traditional economic models. So, in economic theory, safety functions as both a factor of demand and a factor of supply, so shaping market behaviors across the transportation sector. So, on the safety and demand function, the possibility of loss, injury, and death enters travel demands and mode choice decisions. So, travelers choose safer modes when possible. So, when people choose how to get from point A to point B, they don't just think about cost or travel time, they also weigh the risk. So, risk perception affects the route and time of day choices. So, travelers tend to gravitate toward safer modes of transportation when given a choice. A person may prefer a commercial flight over a private charter because of the airline's safety record. The fear of crashes reduces overall mobility on economic activity, and then some may avoid traveling at night on a dangerous highway. So when fear of crashes is high, people travel less, and that suppressed mobility has real economic consequences. So the improvements can stimulate previously suppressed demand. And conversely, when roads become safer, demand for travel often increases because people feel more comfortable using the system. It is worth noting that quantifying the exact magnitude of safety's impact on demand remains a challenge for the profession. And then on the supply safety and supply function, safety plays a large, if somewhat ill defined, part of the cost of transportation supply. So, vehicle prices are inflated by safety related design features. Commercial operators, whether airlines, shipping companies, or bus lines, invest heavily in high quality vehicles, better training, and safety audits. Then, infrastructure costs include safety engineering and adults. And insurance costs are directly tied to crash risk and frequency. And then vehicle manufacturers design safety features into their products, which raises production costs and ultimately vehicle prices. Road builders and planners must incorporate safety engineering from the start, and insurance premiums, which are directly tied to crash risk, represent a significant ongoing cost for both operators and individual vehicle owners. Commercial providers invest heavily in safety to reduce liability, protect reputation, and comply with regulation. In short, safety is not an external to the economics of transportation. It is woven into the fabric of both what consumers demand and what providers supply. Next slide. So, safety as a quality attribute of transportation. Now let's take a different perspective. Economists economists can approach safety the same way they approach quality. So how much safety should be provided? Point 1. Safety as implicit market good. Travelers purchase safety through their transport choices, choosing airlines with better records, paying tolls for safer highways, or buying vehicles with advanced systems. So every time a traveler makes a transportation choice, they are, in a sense, purchasing a level of safety. So when someone pays a premium to fly with a well regarded airline, or buys a car with advanced collision avoidance systems, or takes a toll road instead of a rougher local route, they are expressing a preference for safety. So the market, to some extent, already prices safety in, even if this is done implicitly. Number 2, willingness to pay analysis. So economists used stated and revealed preference methods to quantify the value of statistical life, or VSL, a key metric used to justify safety investments in cost benefit analysis. So the economists use a concept called the value of statistical life, or VSL, to put a dollar figure on the benefit of safety investments. This is not a morbid exercise. It is a rigorous method of comparing the cost of a safety project against the statistical lives it is expected to save. So methods like stated preference surveys and reveal, revealed preference analysis help calculate how much people are actually willing to pay to reduce the risk of death or injury. So the US currently uses a VSL of over $10 million in federal project evaluations. Point number 3, market failure in safety provision. So without regulation, private markets underinvest in safety because many crash costs are externalized to victims, healthcare systems, and society at large. So, for the failure, here's a critical problem. Private markets tend to underinvest in safety. Why? Because many of the costs of crashes are not borne by the people or companies that caused them. Instead, those costs fall on the victims, on hospitals, on government agency services, and on society at large. Economists call this an externality, a cost that spills over onto third parties. When crash costs are externalized this way, private sectors have little incentive to invest in safety beyond the minimum required by law. Point number 4, optimal safety level. So the economic optimum is where the marginalized cost of an additional safety investment equals the marginal benefit in the wait. So the economic optimum is where the marginalized cost of an additional safety investment equals the marginal benefit in terms of crashes prevented and lives saved. So this brings us to the economic concept of the optimal safety level. From a purely economic standpoint, the right amount of safety spending is where the value of crashes prevented and lives saved. So beyond that point, additional spending yields diminishing returns. So below it, we are accepting preventable losses. Policy and investment decisions should aim to strike this balance. Next slide. So the economic cost of road crashes. So road crashes are impossible and famous direct and indirect cost. Take two. So the economic cost of road crashes. So road crashes impose enormous direct and indirect costs on individuals, businesses, and governments. So making safety investment a sound economic decision. So in the United States alone, road crashes cost an estimated $340 billion every single year. Globally, in low income countries, road crash costs can represent as much as 3.7% of the GDP, diverting resources that could otherwise go toward health, education, or economic development. And then more than 50 million people are injured in road crashes around the world each year. So, the components of crash costs. First, medical costs. Emergency care, hospitalization, rehabilitation, and long term disability. These are the most immediate and visible. So, these costs often persist for years after the crash itself. Productivity losses are enormous. So, there are the loss of wages, reduced labor, forced participation. So, when a working age person is killed or seriously injured, the economy loses their labor contribution, their wages, their output, their expertise. This is sometimes the single largest component of crash cost. Then, property damage, vehicle repair, road infrastructure repair costs. So, property damage includes the cost of repairing or replacing damaged vehicles, as well as repairing road infrastructure such as barriers, signage, and road surfaces. The emergency response costs, the police, fire, and the EMS deployment. So, the personal time, fuel, equipment, and administrative overhead they add to the cost. Then legal and insurance administration costs. So processing claims like litigation and payouts add another significant layer of expense to the system. And finally, the societal cost. Pain, grief, quality of life, losses of survivors and families. There are societal costs that are harder to put a number on but no less real. The pain and grief of families, the reduced quality of life for survivors, and the broader psychological impact on communities where crashes are frequent. So, together, these costs make a powerful argument. Investing in safety is not a charitable act, it is sound economics. Next slide. The benefit cost ratio of safety measures. So the research consistently shows that every $1 invested in road safety generates $3 to $6 in economic returns. Through reduced crash costs, that's a return on investment that many private sector projects would envy. So as you see here, this is the benefit cost ratio of safety measures. So for every the safety measures that are followed are rumble strips, safety lighting, guardrail upgrades, intersection signals, and speed management. So the intersection improvements tend to show the highest return on investment among safety project types. This makes sense because intersections are conflict points where multiple traffic streams meet, and crashes there are frequent. Even modest geometric or signal improvements can dramatically reduce crash frequency and severity. And then the preventive investments are far more cost effective than reactive measures. It is always cheaper to design a safe road from the beginning than to correspond to a pattern of crashes with costly emergency services, legal claims, and post crash retrofits. And then, the U.S. Federal Highway Administration officially uses a VSL of over $10 million. When evaluating the benefit side of safety project cost benefit analysis, this is the federal government's formal acknowledgement that preventing one statistical fatality is worth more than $10 million in benefits to society. So, in conclusion, the economics of transportation safety sends a clear message. The cost of inaction far outweighs the cost of investment. A safe transportation system is not just a matter of conscience. It is one of the most financially recreational things a government, agency, or organization can pursue. So that's all. Thank you.
So now we will move on to the economic importance of transportation. Transportation is more than just the movement of people and goods. Transport is a key driver of economic output and employment. Efficient transport creates positive multiplier effects in the economy. Infrastructure density correlates strongly with the level of development. Also, transport connects producers to consumers and labor to firms. Congestion is both an indicator of growth and a constraint on it. So, in economics, transportation is considered a facilitating factor because it reduces distance barriers between producers, consumers, and resources. Without efficient transportation systems, economic activities would be limited, slower, and more costly. Transportation as a driver of economic development. Transportation is a fundamental backbone of economic activity. Countries with dense and efficient transport networks tend to have higher level of economic development. When transportation systems are efficient, several positive outcomes occur. We have better market accessibility for businesses and consumers. Second is opportunities expand. Workers can travel farther and access more job options, which improves labor market efficiency. Third, transportation helps attract investments. Investors prefer locations with reliable infrastructure because it reduces operational risks and costs. Fourth, it promotes social cohesion as communities became more connected. Lastly, in the agricultural sector, transportation allows farmers to bring products to distant markets, increasing productivity and income. On the other hand, deficient transport systems create economic disadvantages. This includes higher logistics costs, limited job access, reduced quality of life, and congestion, which leads to time and fuel losses. So overall, transportation directly influences both economic growth and societal well-being. Macroeconomic versus microeconomic perspective. To better understand its economic importance, transportation can be analyzed from two perspectives, which is macroeconomic and microeconomic. At the macroeconomic level, we look at the entire economy. Transportation contributes to national GDP, employment generation, income levels, trade and export competitiveness. For example, a developed transportation system allows goods to move efficiently across regions and even internationally, strengthening a country's position in global trade. On the other hand, the microeconomic level focuses on individual sectors, firms, and consumers. Here, transportation affects production costs, such as accessing raw materials. We have consumer access to goods and services. We also have logistics and distribution efficiency. Lastly, for business location decisions. For instance, a factory will choose a location with better transport access to minimize cost and maximize profit. In summary, transportation influences both the overall economy and the decision making of individual, firms, and consumers. Economic multiplier effect of transportation. One of the most important concepts is the economic multiplier effect of transportation. This means that a single transport investment creates multiple layers of economic benefits. So let's follow the process. First, when a highway is built, it directly creates jobs like engineers, construction workers, and, and suppliers of materials. Second, firms begins to relocate to areas near the new infrastructure because of improved accessibility. Third, workers can now commute more easily, which increases employment and income. Fourth, this leads to new investments such as businesses, housing developments, and commercial centers. Finally, all of these contribute to regional economic growth, higher tax revenues, and improved quality of life. So, transportation investment does not just produce a single benefit, it creates a chain reaction of economic activities across different sectors. Congestion, an unintended consequence of growth. Next, we discuss which is often seen as a negative issue, but it actually has a deeper economic meaning. Congestion is primarily caused when transport demand grows faster than infrastructure's capacity. This usually happens in rapidly developing areas. Interestingly, congestion can also be interpreted as an economic signal. It indicates high economic activity, strong labor markets, increasing incomes, and in other words, congestion often means that an area is economically active and growing. However, it also has serious economic cost. This includes time delays, wastage, reduced productivity. For example, commuters in highly urbanized areas lose significant hours each year due to traffic. So, to manage congestion, several policy responses are implemented, like congestion pricing, demand management, expanding infrastructure capacity, investing in public transport, and proper land use planning. So, while congestion reflects the economic growth, it must be properly managed to avoid reducing overall efficiency. So, to summarize the economic importance of transportation, first, transportation is a key driver of economic output and employment. Second, it generates multiplier effects, where one investment leads to multiple economic benefits. Third, there is a strong relationship between infrastructure development and national progress. Fourth, transportation connects producers to consumers, workers to jobs, regions to markets. Finally, congestion serves as both an indicator of growth and constraint, meaning it reflects development but also requires proper management. Overall, transportation is not just a support system, it is a central component of economic development and sustainability. Next is types of transportation impacts.
So let us proceed to types of transportation impacts, which includes core, operational, and geographical impacts. So the three types of transportation impacts. First is the core, physical capacity and connectivity. This is the most fundamental impact. The physical ability to convey passengers and freight and the cost of that mobility. This involves setting routes that enable new or existing economic interactions between people and businesses. Next is operational. Reliability, time, and efficiency. Improvements in time performance and reliability along with reduced loss or damage in transit, better utilization of existing transport assets means passengers and freight move rapidly with fewer delays. Lastly is geographical, market access and land value. Access to broader market bases enables economies of scale. Larger and more diverse input bases such as labor, materials, energy, and expanded outputs markets increase regional productivity. Transport also shapes land values and activity location. Next is the core impact, physical capacity and route setting. The core impact of transportation is the most elementary, the ability to physically move people and goods between origin and destination. The passenger mobility enables individuals to access education, employment, healthcare, and social services, fundamental to human development and well-being. Then, freight movement allow raw materials to reach factories and finished goods to reach consumers, forming the basis of industrial and commercial activity. Next is route creation. New routes open previously inaccessible regions to economic participation, often transforming agrarian communities into thriving commercial zones. Lastly is cost of cost of mobility. The direct economic cost of moving people and goods, fuel, labor, vehicle wear, tolls is the primary determinant of freight and passenger prices. Next is operational impact, reliability and efficiency. Operational improvements maximize the output of existing infrastructure, often generating significant economic value without building new road or railways. First is travel time reduction. Faster movement of goods and people directly reduces productivity losses and enables more economic transaction per unit of time. Next is reliability improvements. Predictable and on-time arrivals enable business to operate just in time. Supply chains, reducing inventory holding costs, reduce loss and damage. Better infrastructure quality reduces cargo damage, spoilage, especially critical for agricultural goods, and vehicle wear. Next is asset utilization. When transport systems run reliably, trucks, trains, and ships complete more trips, improving the productivity of capital-intensive assets. Next is the geographical impact, market access and land value. Geography is transformed by transportation, determining which region flourish, which economic activities locate where, and how land is valued. First is broader market access. Transportation allows firms to sell to larger markets, enabling mass production and economies of scale that reduce unit costs for consumers. Second is diverse input access. Access to larger and more varied base of raw materials, parts, energy, and labor increases production flexibility and efficiency. Third is economies of scale. Larger accessible market allow larger production runs, reducing average cost, improving global competitiveness of regional industries. Fourth is activity location. Transport corridors determine where businesses, housing, and commercial centers locate, shaping the spatial structure of entire regions. Fifth is land value effects. Land near efficient transport services commands higher prices due to accessibility benefits. Conversely, land near noise or pollution sources, such as airports and highways, loses value.
I'm Francis in Miranday and I'm going to report economic returns of transport investments. Transport investments show declining marginal returns over time. Initial infrastructure bids yield the highest economic impact. As a network mature, additional investment produces diminishing gains. Three key reasons: existing accumulation, economic fits, and clustering. Next, declining marginal returns of transport investments. While transport investments can be transformative in the underdeveloped areas, the more developed a network becomes, the lower the return on additional investments. So this is the graph of the declining marginal returns of transport investment. So return on investments versus network maturity. Then key principle: early investment in absent or spare networks produce transformational returns. Mature and extensive networks yield only marginal efficiency gains from further investments. The law of diminishing marginal returns apply universally to transport infrastructures. Policymakers must evaluate where networks are in their development cycle before committing funds. Next, three reasons for declining marginal returns. First is high accumulation of existing infrastructure. Where accessibility is already high and networks are extensive, further investments yield only marginal improvements. New roads or rails in well-served areas provide minimal added value beyond convenience and comfort. The economic impact of transport investments is significant when infrastructure was previously lacking, and marginal when it is already extensive. Second is economic structural shifts. As economics develop, they shift from primary resource extraction and secondary manufacturing sectors toward services and logistics. A manufacturing economy relies on roads, rails, and ports. A service economy prioritizes urban transport and logistics efficiency. In both cases, infrastructure matters, but the type and relative importance of transport shifts with the economy. Then last is clustering and agglomeration effects. Certain locations develop strong competitive advantages through agglomeration that cannot easily be reversed by improved accessibility elsewhere. Transports can concentrate development in hubs rather than distributing it to lagging regions. Less accessible regions may not benefit from investments if embedded in structurally unequal economic systems. Next, strategic transport investment planning. Knowing when and where to invest is as important as knowing how much to invest. Strategic sequencing maximizes economic returns. So, under investment context is rural or remote area. Next is developing region, growing mature urban area, and saturated network. Then next is network status. Then the under is absent or very sparse. Basic routes exist. Regional grid established. Dense multimodal or and fully developed. The next is expected return. Very high, moderate, low, moderate, and marginal. Then last is strategy. Under is prioritize new connectivity, expand network, and improve capacity. Urban transport, reliability, maintenance, technology upgrades, demand management and pricing. Then the technology hype cycle in transportation. When transport investment rely on emerging technologies, they can go through a hype phase with unrealistic expectation about their potential and benefits. First is technology trigger. A breakthrough sparks intense interest. Experimental projects emerge. Media attention is high but real-world applications are limited. Then second is peak of inflated expectations. Unrealistic projections dominate. Massive investments are made based on speculative benefits. Policy may follow hype. Third is throw of disillusionment. Reality sets in. Early projects fail or underperform. Public and political support wanes. Investments are scaled back. Fourth is slope of enlightenment. Realistic use cases emerge. Best practices develop. Second generation technologies address early flaws. Then last is plate of productivity. Technology is mainstream and delivering real, sustained economic value. Benefits are predictable and understood. Next. Then, that's all for my report, and thank you.
Good day, everyone. For this part of our discussion, we'll be looking at transportation as an economic factor, specifically how transportation infrastructure shapes the economy in very real and measurable ways. We'll cover five major economic impacts. These are geographic specialization, scope, scale and scope of production, increased competition, land values, and lastly, comparative advantage theory. So the first concept is geographic specialization and comparative advantage. It is about the efficient transportation that enables regions to specialize in producing goods for which they have the greatest relative advantage. It is the foundation of trade theory. So the geographic specialization is rooted in Ricardo's theory of comparative advantage. It states here that a region will tend to specialize in the production of goods and services for which it has the greatest advantage or least disadvantage compared to other regions, as long as appropriate transport infrastructure exists for trade. So transportation is the enabler of this specialization. So below are the examples of Ricardo's comparative advantage. We have the agricultural belt, the service hubs, industrial zones, and resource extraction. So think about it this way. An agricultural belt with fertile land can feed a nation, but only if highways and railway connects it to the cities. In industrial zones, it needs ports and roads to import raw materials and export finished products. Meanwhile, cities with strong airport access naturally evolved into hubs for finance and technology. And lastly, resource-rich regions like mining areas rely entirely on bulk transport like pipelines and rail to export commodities. So the key takeaway in geographic specialization and comparative advancement is that the transportation is the enabler of the specialization. Without it, regions would be forced to produce everything themselves inefficiently. Next, let's talk about the scale and scope of production. It is the efficient transport that enables goods to travel further, unlocking mass markets and enabling just-in-time production systems. So we have concepts of scale and scope production. First, we have the economies of scale, just-in-time supply chain, global sourcing, and mass distribution. So economies of scale, as mass markets grow due to a better transport access, production can scale up. Larger production runs reduce unit costs, enabling competitive pricing and greater profit margins. So just-in-time supply chains transport reliability enables just-in-time supply chains, inventory management, reducing the need for large stockpiles, cutting warehouse costs, and improving responsiveness to market demand. Global sourcing is now standard practice. Multinational firms can source out inputs from the lowest cost global suppliers and distribute outputs to the most profitable markets, enabled entirely by the transport networks. And lastly, we have the mass distribution. So consumer goods reach wider markets at lower retail prices through mass distribution networks like trails, trucking, intermodal freight system. Next, we have increased competition and land value effects. Efficient transportation also reshapes competition and real estate. So we have increased competition and land value effects. In increased competition, when transport is efficient, the potential market for any product or service expands. So does competition. We have wider range of goods and services becomes available to consumers. Competition drives down prices and improves quality. Innovation is spurred by competition market pressures. Lastly, globalization has produced a worldwide competitive arena. So the result, it has become consumers benefits through lower prices, more choices, and better quality, all enabled by transport infrastructure. Next is the land value effects. So land adjacent to or served by good transport generally commands higher value. We have the positive and negative effects. Positive effects, we have the access to diverse retail and services raised by residential values. We have better employment, accessibility improves quality of life, and commercial land near hubs attracts premium rents. So the negative effects of land value is we have land near airports and highways suffer from noise pollution or air pollution. Um, Diminish land value for residential use near heavy freight, and infrastructure disruption during construction reduces values. And finally, let's look at how transportation impacts two critical markets, which is the commodity and labor markets. So commodity market, improvement in the efficiency with which firm access raw materials and parts and reach their customers. So transport expands the range of commodities available to industrial and manufacturing system. Lower logistic costs makes previously inviable raw material sources economically attractive. Expanded distribution networks allow firms to serve international market competitively, and commodity prices stabilize when multiple transport routes cease because the supply chain becomes more resilient. Next, we have the labor market. It improvement in access to labor and reduction in access costs through better local commute or use of lower cost global labor markets. So urban transport improvements expands the labor catchment area for employers. Commuting infrastructure determines how far workers can travel to jobs. Global air and sea transport enables firms to relocate production to lower cost regions. And remote work infrastructure or digital infrastructure is becoming the next emerging frontier about labor market access. So in summary, transportation doesn't just move goods and people, it shapes entire economies by determining what gives produce, where, by whom, and at what cost. That concludes my part of the presentation. Thank you.
Hello, good day. So I'll be reporting about transportation impacts, diffusion, and module synthesis, like transport and economic growth, cause or effect, technology diffusion in transportation, containerization as a case study, balance and sustainable development. So first, transportation and economic growth, cause or effect. The relationship between transportation and economic development is difficult to formally establish and has been debated for many years. Transportation is catalyst in some circumstances. Transport investments appear to be a catalyst for economic growth. Opening of previously inaccessible regions, enabling agricultural surpluses to reach urban markets, attracting manufacturing investment to well-connected zones, and creating employment during construction and operation. Example, the US interstate highway system generated an estimated $6 return for every $1 invested, and growth as driver of investment. In other cases, economic growth generates pressure on existing infrastructure. First is rising GDP drives vehicle ownership and freight volumes. Urban growth creates demand for transit expansion. Increasing trade volumes require port and airport upgrades. Congestion signals that infrastructure has not kept pace. In this scenario, transport investment responds to rather than leads growth. Next is technology diffusion and transportation. Transport technologies follow a predictable path of adoption and maturity, each phase with distinct economic implications. First is the experimentation. New transport technology is tested, limited scale, high risk, high cost. Examples, early steam railways, prototype electric vehicles. And technology provides viable initial commercial deployment. Early adopters benefit, but costs remain high. Infrastructure begins to form. Third is adoption. Mainstream uptake begins, network effects emerge, regulatory frameworks develop, and economic productivity gains start to materialize. And diffusion, technology is widespread, maximum productivity gains achieved. Infrastructure investment peak, most significant economic benefits realized. Lastly is obsolescence. New, newer technologies emerge, returns decline, existing infrastructure becomes a liability. Transition costs and stranded asset risks. Next is case study, containerization and economic globalization. Containerization is a prime example of technology diffusion that transferred global trade and economic geography. Here, and as you can see, there's a graph about containerization, productivity gains by decade. Key lessons. Most significant productivity benefits were derived in the 1990s and 2000s when economic globalization was accelerating. And containerization enabled a 90% reduction in cargo handling costs, revolutionizing global supply chains. Developing nations that invested in container ports gained disproportionate export growth in the diffusion phase. Later phases face diminishing returns. The infrastructure is now ubiquitous and no longer confers competitive advantage, and a new technology or autonomous shipping, drone logistics may trigger the next productivity S curve. Transport for balance and sustainable development. Transport markets and related infrastructure networks are key drivers in the promotion of more balanced and sustainable development, particularly for less developed regions and disadvantaged social groups. Regional equity. Well-designed transport investments can reduce spatial inequality by connecting lagging regions to national and global markets, providing them with economic opportunities previously unavailable. Second is social inclusion. Access to transport determines access to education, healthcare, employment, and social participation. Disadvantaged groups, elderly, low-income, disabled benefit most from inclusive transport policies. Environmental balance. Sustainable transport, rail, electric vehicles, cycling infrastructure reduces carbon emissions and supports long-term economic viability. Transport accounts for 25% of global carbon oxide emissions. And economic resilience. Diverse and redundant transport networks protect economies from shocks. Single mode dependencies create vulnerability, as demonstrated by COVID 19's disruption of global supply chains. Lastly is integrated summary and key takeaways. First is safety planning is a collaborative science. Effective safety requires engineering, enforcement, EMS, and education, working in concert with planners, health officials, tribal governments, and elected leaders. Second is safety as an economic dimension. Safety is a quality attribute of transport. Crashes impose massive economic costs. Every $1 in prevention generates multiple dollars in economic benefits. Third is transportation drives economic development. Efficient transport creates multiplier effect, job creation, market expansion, reduced costs, and higher productivity across all economic sectors. 4 is investments face diminishing returns. Transport investment yields highest returns when networks are absent. As they mature, additional investment must be carefully justified against alternatives. 5 is technology diffusion shapes the economy. New transport technologies follow predictable adoption curves. Peak benefits arrive in mid-diffusion. Hype must be tempered with realistic assessment. Lastly, sustainability and equity are non-negotiable. Transport policy must address environmental sustainability, regional equity, and social inclusion to support balanced long-term development. And that's all for our report.